So I'm sitting in the makeup chair, probably for some thinly veiled corporate villain or another, trying to ignore the industrial-grade air freshener they used at the Fox lot back then. You know the one. That sickly sweet chemical assault they sprayed to cover whatever festered beneath. Like trying to perfume a landfill. Slight, dry chuckle. It always reminded me of those desperate, frantic attempts to sanitize a script that was already fundamentally rotten.
Rotten, yeah. Or the stale tuna melt they served on Thursdays in the green rooms at Warner. Same thing, you'd smell it walking past. A ghost of desperation clinging to the upholstery. Almost as bad as the hopefuls packed in those tiny waiting rooms. You were probably one of, Miguel, in those dark suits, waiting to tell someone how to betray their own family for a stock option.
Oh, I was. Many times. And I probably saw you in there too, Em, looking like you just walked off a fishing trawler, ready to deliver some profoundly cynical wisdom about the futility of human ambition. They always knew what they wanted from us, didn't they? That specific shade of jaded, of morally ambiguous authority. It was like they had a template, and we just had to fit the mold. The smell, the awful catering, the endless fluorescent lights. It all just reinforced the industrial nature of it. Another cog. Makes you want to bang on something, you know? Just make some noise that isn't pre-approved.
Template. Exactly. Like we were all just different grades of sandpaper. Coarse, medium, fine grit for whatever rough edge they needed. And those rooms, Miguel, those damn waiting rooms. You ever notice the art? Or the lack thereof? Just beige. Always beige. No character, no thought. Just an antechamber for interchangeable parts. Reminded me of the reports from the early days of the Soviet grain collectives. Efficient, sure, but soul-crushing, always soul-crushing.
Beige. And those chairs. You'd think for all the money they were making, they could spring for something that wouldn't leave an imprint on your posterior for an hour. Or that one production office, the one with the cracked ceiling tiles that looked like they were perpetually about to collapse. The metaphor wasn't exactly subtle, was it? For the industry, for our careers, for the whole damn enterprise. Dry chuckle. Always one leak somewhere. But look, Em, I brought you here to talk about the project, the one that got away. Ideally, we shoot this on 70 millimeters. Or, failing that, whatever they use now that pretends to be 70 millimeters. The point, Emmet, is scale, not just of the visual, but of the internal. Everything about this project, from the first frame to the last, is designed to feel vast, yet intimately observed. It's a paradox, I know. But then, isn't that often where the truth resides? I've been kicking this around for, longer than I care to admit. Years. Decades, maybe. It's the kind of thing that gestates, you see. A constant hum beneath the surface of all the other things. The corporate raiders, the cynical detectives, the men who know too much and care too little. The roles that, for some inexplicable reason, I found myself repeatedly inhabiting, and excelling at, apparently. A certain gravitas, a dry, cutting wit, a fundamental distrust of human nature. All very useful tools in the right cinematic toolbox. But this is different. This is the Ethereum architect.
The Ethereum architect? That's quite a mouthful, Miguel. Sounds like a sci-fi epic. You written yourself into a spacesuit?
Not a spacesuit, Emmet. Not a helmet, not a phaser, not even a particularly well-tailored trench coat. Though there will be architectural drawings, many of them, and blueprints. Stacks of them, meticulously rendered, each line a testament to an almost impossible ideal. We open on this, a single pane of frosted glass. Not pristine, mind you. Dust motes, caught in the sliver of sunlight filtering through, dance like miniature galaxies. The glass itself is old, opaque, the kind that blurs the world outside into an impressionistic smear. A Panavision lens, ever so slowly, pushes in. Closer, closer still. Until the imperfections, the fine scratches that web the surface, become stark and profound. We hear nothing but the faint, rhythmic ticking of an unseen clock. Each tick a small, precise incision into the silence. And then, the sound of a pencil. Graphite on paper. A faint whisper at first, then growing, becoming a careful, deliberate scrape the camera holds on the glass, just long enough for us to sense a deeper pattern, a hidden order behind the blurring. Then it drifts, almost imperceptibly, to reveal a cluttered desk, an old drafting table, and a hand, my hand. Calloused, precise, tracing a complex curve, the kind of curve you wouldn't find in nature, or in any building you've ever seen.
Frosted glass and a pencil. You're really selling the grandeur, Miguel.
Grandeur, Emmet, is often found in the unseen, or the overlooked. My character, Arthur Penhaligon, is a ghost of a man, a relic. He was, in his prime, a celebrated urban planner, not an architect, mind you, a planner. The man who designed the grids, the infrastructure, the arterial roads that made cities work. Efficiently. Logically, the concrete arteries, the steel skeletons, the brutalist forms that housed the very corporations I've so often portrayed. He built systems, not dreams, and he built them with a ruthless, almost surgical, precision. But now, he's retired. Reclusive, he lives in a small, meticulously organized apartment, a microcosm of his life's work, overlooking one of the very concrete canyons he helped create. And for the last 3 decades, in absolute secret, he has been designing the Ethereum.
The Ethereum. Is that the building? Or is it something else?
It's a building, yes. But it's a building that can only exist as an idea. A symphony of light, sound, and precisely modulated electromagnetic frequencies. It's a structure designed not to house people, but to evoke pure emotion. To align the human consciousness with cosmic harmony. It's the antithesis of everything Arthur Penhaligon stood for professionally. It is his penance, his confession, and his purest act of faith. You see, Emmet, my usual characters, they operate from a place of fundamental cynicism. They dismantle, they manipulate, they expose the ugly truths. Penhaligon, on the surface, might appear to be another iteration of that. The aging intellectual, meticulously withdrawn, but beneath that veneer of order and logical detachment, there is this raw, aching idealism, a desire to create something purely beautiful, purely good, without compromise or practical application. To prove that the intangible has value, that there is an architecture of the soul, and he, the man who built concrete jungles, finally understood how to draw its blueprints. The plot ignites when Penhaligon is reluctantly brought in as a consultant for a massive new urban redevelopment project. A revitalization, they call it, which, in the parlance of such things, means tearing down something old and replacing it with something new, shinier, and devoid of soul. During his meticulous, almost obsessive review of the old municipal plans, he stumbles upon a forgotten detail. A tiny, almost invisible community tucked away in the very heart of the city, a place that, on paper, has no historical or economic significance. Just a cluster of old, mismatched houses, a small park, a forgotten stream, a place marked for complete eradication by the new development. But this isn't just any old community. This is the place where a young Arthur Penhaligon, orphaned and living with a stern, pragmatic aunt, first encountered beauty, not in a building, but in the way the afternoon light filtered through the leaves of an ancient oak, in the sound of the children playing by the stream, in the intricate, organic chaos of life that existed outside of straight lines and logical grids. It was the spark that ignited his secret life's work, this yearning for an Ethereum, a harmony that defied logic. Now, he finds himself facing the very forces he once embodied. The ruthless efficiency experts, the corporate developers, the politicians who speak in platitudes about progress while seeing only profit. Men and women who embody every cynical, amoral corporate schemer I've ever played. And Arthur Penhaligon, this reclusive intellectual, must fight them, not with wit, not with authority, certainly not with violence. He must fight with the fragile, almost impossible concept of beauty itself. He must articulate the value of the intangible, the spiritual, against the cold, hard logic of concrete and capital.
So you're playing a champion of old houses? A sentimental architect?
A champion of what is felt, Emmet, of what cannot be quantified. He's not fighting for sentimentality, He's fighting for an idea. The idea that something seemingly insignificant, something without inherent value in a material sense, can hold the key to human flourishing. He's fighting for the belief that architecture isn't just about shelter, but about aspiration, about connection, about creating a space that resonates with the soul, even if that space is just the memory of sunlight on a forgotten stream. The transformation of Arthur Penhaligon is the heart of the film. He begins as a man whose very movements are precise, whose voice is measured, whose every thought is a finely honed calculation. But as he becomes more deeply embroiled in this fight, as he tries to explain to these ruthless pragmatists why this little pocket of old houses, this forgotten corner, is vital, he cracks. He shows vulnerability. He stammers. He experiences fear, not for his own life, but for the extinction of an idea. He learns to use his meticulous mind, not for ruthless efficiency, but for desperate, passionate preservation. He argues with the fervor of a zealot, citing poetry, philosophy, even obscure mathematical theories to defend the intangible. There's a scene, a critical one, where he's presenting his case to the city council. These are the same kinds of bureaucratic, unfeeling bodies I've often been cast against. He's projected his blueprints for the Ethereum onto the council chambers, walls, not as a proposal for a new building, but as a visual metaphor, a plea for them to see the invisible architecture of the community they intend to destroy. The light, the sound, the frequencies, they wash over the faces of these stony officials. He isn't speaking of property values or historical designation. He's speaking of harmony, of resonance, of soul, and he's doing it with a desperate, almost raw vulnerability, his voice cracking, his composure failing him, until he is simply a man pleading for beauty. It's an act of profound, almost suicidal idealism. He's a man who has always used his intellect as a shield, as a weapon. For the first time, he's using it as a conduit for pure, unadulterated belief, and in doing so, he exposes himself. He sheds the armor of cynicism that has defined his professional life, and, frankly, the armor I've become so adept at wearing on screen. He becomes overtly heroic, not with a gun or a sharp retort, but with an almost childlike, unyielding conviction in the power of beauty and the fragile, ephemeral connections that make life worth living. He becomes vulnerable, desperate, and ultimately, profoundly human. The ending isn't neat. It's not a clear victory. He might lose the fight for the physical space, but in losing, he wins something far greater. He ignites a spark in others, perhaps in one young, cynical intern sitting in the back row of that council meeting, who, for just a moment, glimpses the Ethereum. Or perhaps he simply finds peace in having articulated his lifelong dream, having fought for something purely good, purely beautiful, even if it was doomed. It's about the resonance, Emmet. It's about the resonance, Emmet. The subtle shift in the collective consciousness. It's a film about how the architecture of our inner lives shapes the world around us, and how sometimes the quietest, most vulnerable act of idealism can be the most revolutionary. It's the antithesis of the corporate schemer, the jaded authority. It's a man allowing himself to be undone by beauty, and in that undoing, finding himself truly.
That is a lot. But hear mine. Ideally, we shoot this on 70mm. None of that digital nonsense. You want to see the dust motes dancing in the light. You want to feel the weight of every shadow. This isn't some quick-cut popcorn flick. This needs texture. He sips his lukewarm coffee, staring out a rain-streaked window. Though it's a perfectly clear day, Miguel Ferrer, across the small, cluttered office, watches him with a mixture of amusement and genuine curiosity.
70mm, huh? That's ambitious, Emmet. For any film these days, let alone one that's still on paper.
Paper, yeah. Bound in a binder that's seen more coffee rings than a diner waitress. But the vision's there, Miguel. Clear as a bell. Been rattling around in this old skull for, well, long enough to pick up some cobwebs. Long enough to know it ain't going away. And it needs the clarity of 70mm for the details. The small things. He turns from the window, his gaze settling on Ferrer, direct and unblinking. It's called The Hummingbird's Lament. Ferrer blinks, a flicker of polite confusion crossing his face, quickly followed by an intrigued frown.
The Hummingbird's Lament. That's certainly a title. Not exactly what I'd expect from you, Emmet. No grudge match at Greasy Joe's or Cop's Last Stand in the Rain.
Precisely. That's the point, ain't it? The expectation. Always the expectation. They want a crooked judge, a cynical detective, a boss who's about to fire someone. They see the face. They fill in the blanks. This is something else. He leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. His voice drops. A conspiratorial murmur. Yet it holds the authority of a seasoned storyteller. We open and pay attention here because this is where the money is, where the whole damn thing rests on a knife's edge of perception. We open, not on some gritty back alley, not on a siren wailing, but on absolute stillness. He pauses, eyes narrowed, visualizing it. It's pre-dawn, just before the first blush of light. We're on a single shot, wide, expansive, Panavision C-Series anamorphic, for that slight, almost imperceptible breathiness in the bokeh. We're deep in the Klamath Wilderness, maybe southern Oregon, northern California, ancient redwoods, massive, silent sentinels. A dense, primeval fog, the kind that swallows sound, is just beginning to recede, clinging to the lowest branches, drifting like ghosts through the undergrowth. He gestures with a hand, painting the scene in the air. The only sound is the drip of condensation from the needles. And then, subtle, almost subliminal, a humming. Not a buzzing, mind you, a deep, resonant hum, vibrating through the ground, through the air. And as the fog thins just enough, a single ray of sunlight, sharp and golden, spears through the canopy, illuminating a small, gnarled hand, calloused and weathered, gently turning over a fallen redwood cone. That hand. That's my hand. Ferrer leans back, a genuine spark of awe now mixing with his confusion.
Wow. That's quite an image, Emmet. Very art house. So, you're a park ranger? A hermit? You're still out in the woods, just alone this time.
Alone, yes. But not alone in the way they expect. And not just a ranger. My character, his name is Silas Finch. He's lived in a cabin up there, far off any grid, for going on 40 years. He's the local recluse, the oddity folks whisper about in the one general store in town. They see him as the taciturn old coot who smells faintly of pine needles and wood smoke. They see the gruff exterior, the eyes that look like they've seen too much. They see the Emmet Walsh they're used to seeing. He takes another sip of coffee, a deliberate, slow movement. But Silas is a conduit, Miguel. He's a walking, breathing antenna for the forest itself. He doesn't just hear the wind, he hears the story the wind is telling. He doesn't just see a bird, he sees the intricate tapestry of its migration, its lineage, its tiny, desperate hopes. He doesn't speak much because he's constantly listening to a symphony no one else can hear. He knows the health of the entire ecosystem just by the way a certain fungus grows on a particular tree, or the cadence of a distant owl's hoot. He feels the forest's pain, its joy, its gradual, agonizing decline.
So he's like a nature whisperer? A forest shaman?
In a way, but without the mumbo-jumbo. It's grounded, Miguel. Utterly grounded. There's no magic spell, no glow around his hands. It's just a profound, almost burdensome empathy. He perceives. And he cares. Deeply. It's a quiet suffering, this gift. Because he sees the encroaching development, the clear-cutting, the poisoned streams, the wilting of things that have stood for centuries. He feels it like a physical ache, lament. That's the forest's lament, filtered through him.
So the plot, what happens? Does a big corporation come in to chop down his forest, and he has to what, commune with the trees to stop them? That's what they'd expect, right? The gruff old man fighting the system.
No, that's the movie they'd make. That's the obvious choice. And that ain't Silas. Silas doesn't fight. Not directly, he understands the futility of it, the scale of it. He's just a man. But his burden, his lament, becomes too much. He starts seeing visions, or rather, he starts seeing the future of the forest. The dying embers of what it once was, juxtaposed with its vibrant past. These visions overwhelm him. Physically, he starts to waste away.
So he gets sick because he's too connected?
The weight of the world, Miguel. The true weight. He's a repository of its sorrow, and his only solace, his only way to communicate this profound sadness, this impending loss, is through these intricate, almost spiritual, carvings he makes. He collects these specific pieces of redwood burl, fallen branches, river stones, and he carves them. Not crude, folk art carvings. These are delicate, intricate, almost microscopic in their detail. They're miniature ecosystems, perfectly rendered, each one telling a piece of the forest's story, its life, its death. And among them, hidden in plain sight, are tiny, translucent hummingbirds, caught in a permanent state of flight or grief. That's his art, his unsung, unknown art.
And no one knows about this?
Not for 40 years, until a young, ambitious city slicker art curator, a woman, maybe mid-30s, smart as a whip but utterly disconnected from the natural world, stumbles upon his cabin. Her car breaks down on a back road. She's lost, looking for a signal. She's initially wary of him, sees him as the crazy old hermit. He sees her as another encroaching presence, but she finds his carvings. Not by accident. She's drawn to them, the way the forest calls to him. She recognizes something profound, something primal, in their silent beauty. She sees past the beard, past the weathered face, past the old coat. She sees the soul.
So she wants to exhibit his work? She wants to make him famous?
That's what she thinks she wants. That's what the world thinks it wants. But Silas knows fame won't save the forest. It won't ease its lament, and the attention would destroy him. He's not doing it for accolades. He's doing it because the forest demands to be heard. His dilemma, his central conflict, is whether to allow his voice, the forest's voice, to be amplified, even if it means exposing himself to a world that will misunderstand, exploit, or simply fail to truly see what he's offering. Does he sacrifice his quiet anonymity, his peace, for the possibility, however slim, that someone, somewhere, might finally listen? He leans back, watching Ferrer, a challenge in his eyes. The beauty of it, Miguel, is that I don't get to be the gruff, wise old man who saves the day with a shotgun and a witty one-liner. I'm just sensitive, vulnerable, deeply empathetic. I'm the heart of it, not the brawn. I carry the weight of the film on my shoulders, not just as a character, but as the embodiment of something precious and overlooked. My strength isn't in my fight, but in my ability to simply feel, to grieve, to lament.
That's incredibly powerful, Emmet. It really is. It turns everything on its head. You, as the lead, as the embodiment of such a delicate, fragile wisdom. It's a role that demands immense stillness, immense empathy. And frankly, the way you've been typecast, they'd never let you do it. They'd want a fight scene, a confrontation, something where you can snap at someone.
You see it. You always did. The truth of the matter is, Hollywood ain't ready for Silas Finch. They ain't ready for an old man's quiet despair. They ain't ready for a hero whose strength is his weakness, whose triumph is merely a moment of quiet understanding. They ain't ready for a man who plays a role and lets the world see him beyond the badge, beyond the cynical smirk, beyond the exasperated sigh.
No. They'd say it's too quiet, too internal. Where's the hook, they'd ask? Where's the franchise potential? They'd want you to kick someone in the shins while reciting poetry.
Exactly. And that's why it sits in that binder, with the coffee rings. Maybe someday, when the world's caught up to the quiet hum,